All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, like a mobile device. If you're on a larger screen, like a desktop, laptop, computer, something like that, it's going to be to the right of the video. So I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So let's take a look here. So Greg O, it's a little more than an hour ago, but we'll answer his to start with. All right, so Greg O says, when I video my swing, I have shallowed the club properly, but have trouble clearing the left hip. The result is early extension. Any idea to the cause of this? Well, you said it. It's early extension. That is the cause. So what we have in the golf swing is we have what's called forward bend, and then we have extension. Extension's where you can think of it this way. Forward bend is where you're making the angle between your lower body and your upper body smaller, and then extension's the opposite, where you're making the angle bigger, right? So that's 180-degree angle, and that would be like a 45-degree angle, right? So if you come down, you're shallowing out the club nicely, but then you make this angle bigger to start the downswing, then you're going to swing too much from the inside. If you're not physically capable of making that angle smaller as you go down, then you actually need to come down steeper. Because if you don't, because if I shallow the club a lot, so if I get here and I shallow the club a lot and then I early extend, well, my club's just working way too much from the inside, and I'm going to hit blocks and hooks and probably chunks and thins and things like that. So if I'm shallowing out the club, I have to match that up with getting some forward bend, pushing those hips back, right, and then extending as I come through the ball. So that's what I would try to do. I do some drills where you try to get into more forward bend. So you're feeling this as you start the downswing. So you're pushing those hips back as you're turning, as you're rotating, and you're getting that chest on top of the ball as you're coming through. And I would actually exaggerate it and feel like you never extend through the entire shot. I would actually feel like you're doing this, right? So that you're staying, I'd feel like you're staying in, like you're bumping the hip in and you're staying in forward bend all the way through. And the reality is that you'll probably just extend a little bit later. And then if you do actually stay in forward bend too long, then you can always ease off of it. But that's what I would try to feel like that you're doing, that you're pushing those hips back. A drill that you can do is set up with a chair or something behind you. And I recommend using like a chair, your golf bag, something that is heavy enough that you can feel it, but light enough that you can push it away. I've seen a lot of people do this drill with like an alignment stick, putting an alignment stick, sticking it in the ground. But honestly, I've tried it with the alignment stick and it sucks. It doesn't work very well. The reason is you can't feel this alignment stick. I don't know about you. Maybe I'm just not as sensitive back there, but I can't feel that stick behind me. But this chair, I can feel it. So I don't recommend using an alignment stick for this. Maybe if you put like 4 or 5 alignments behind you, you'd maybe be able to feel some of them. But just one back there doesn't really do anything. So set up, and I'll give yourself about a hand width between your hips and your backside, or the chair and your backside there. And then I go up to the top. And then when you start the downswing, push back into that chair as you're rotating back. And as you can see there, I moved that chair out of the way. And I'd be literally trying to get my left pocket here, my pocket, not my back pocket, but my left pocket here. I'd be trying to get that to be on the chair as I'm coming into contact. That'd be an exaggeration, but that's what I'd be trying to do. So that's what I would recommend doing. All right, so Dan A says, hey, Q, when going through the downswing, when do we stand up through the ball? Specifically, where should the hands and the club be before we stand up? It really depends on the person. Like I just talked about with, I think it was Greg's question, right? The steeper you are, the faster you're going to start to stand up. You might start to stand up right away in the backswing. You may get, if you're here and you're steep in order to hit the ball functionally, you've got to stand up right away. You have to, because if you don't, then you're just going to swing over the top. If I get here, and if I'm steep, and then I go like this, right, then and I don't stand up until later, like we see someone who's shallow, then it's you're going to come over the top. You're going to chop down into the ball. So there's no one point in the swing where everyone needs to start standing up out of it. It really depends on how shallow your swing is, how much rotation you have, and things like that. So you have to match it up. It's a sliding scale, right? It can happen right at the beginning if you're steeper. If you're really, really shallow, it may not happen until you're getting, you may be squatting down and not really extending up until you get to here, right? It really just depends on how dynamic your swing is and how steep or shallow you are. I wish I could give you a definite answer like, okay, this is exactly when it happens, but it's a sliding thing. It really depends on a lot of factors in order to be functional. So keep that in mind, when you're looking at your swing there. I would say, most people know if they're extending too early or too late. Basically, a good indicator would be if you've got, just like with Greg there, like Greg talked about how he's shallowing the club, but he's extending too early, right? Well, I would feel like you're never extending, right? I would actually take swings where you feel like you're never extending and see what that looks like. And if you're still extending too early, then you got to break it down and go slower. Maybe do some pausing swings and go really slow. Literally do some swings where you're trying to hit the ball half the distance with a full swing that you normally would. So let's say you hit your 8-iron 150 yards. I'd literally take some swings where you're swinging slow enough with a full swing that you're only hitting it, 50% of the distance, so 75 yards. So that might look something like this, where I'm taking like a full swing, right? So that would be like, it would probably go like half of the distance if I did that. So you got to break things down and go slower if you can't quite get it. But I would try to exaggerate it as much as you possibly can at first. And if that doesn't do the trick, then you got to slow it down, exaggerate it as much as you possibly can. And then actually get to the point to where you're actually overdoing it. You're not extending soon enough, right? And that an indication that you're not extending soon enough would be that you see this club start to steepen as you're coming down, right? This club is steepening too much, because if it's steep, then you either need to keep that forward bend and not extend, or basically extend later and get the club shallower, right? It's one or the other. So you have to look at, is the club steep? Is it shallow? And then extend or try to stay in that forward bend longer if it's still shallow. So Drew D says, hi, Q. What's up, Drew? Thanks for joining us. So Tom P says, I apologize. I asked this question in your last office hours, but missed the answer. Real quick, this happens all the time. So if you miss your question in office hours, you can still see the answer. We archive all of the office hours. So unless there's some technical last week there was technical difficulties with one of the days. So we weren't able to archive it. For some reason, YouTube wouldn't let me do it. But most of the time, you're going to be able to go back and look at it. So if you ask a question and something comes up, you got to go take off. No worries. Directly after the office hours ends, so today will end at noon Eastern time, you can go to the office hours highlights page and scroll down to the bottom of that page, and you can see the archive. Every single one that we've ever done, I think, unless they cut off how many you can have in that playlist. But there's a lot in there. There's hundreds and hundreds of office hours in there, and you can watch all of them. It's included with your membership. So if you happen to miss your question, then all you have to do is click the office hours tab, click the office hours highlights, scroll down to the bottom of that page. Then you'll see the office hours archives there, and you can just select from the playlist there the day that you asked your question. And it is going to be an hour long, so you may have to kind of filter through it to find it. But if you have an idea of, did I ask it earlier in the office hours, later in the office hours, you may be able to find it more easily. So anyway, it goes on to ask, where should your eyes be looking at the impact position? Should you focus behind, on top, ahead of the ball. I seem to make better contact when I look ahead of the ball. Is it a preference or proven physics on where your eyes should look? It's a preference. I can look. I've actually seen Instagram videos where there's a guy, he kind of just looks at the camera and swings and just flushes it. He probably doesn't do that every time, but obviously he's not looking at the ball and he's flushing it, right? You can look ahead of the ball. You can look behind the ball. Personally, I'm just kind of looking in the area of the ball. I'm not, there's some people that kind of look at a dimple, which can be helpful too. There's some people, like in your case, you're talking about how you hit the ball better by looking in front of the ball. That's completely fine as well. You do what makes you hit the ball better. There's nothing out there that says you can only hit the ball good if you look at this part, right? If you're looking at a place and you're hitting the ball good and you look in a different place and you hit the ball bad, look in the place that helps you hit the ball good, right? That's what you want to do. So me personally, I'm just looking down at the ball. I'm not looking at a specific part of it, in front of it, behind it. I'm just looking kind of just in this area. And things are moving so fast at impact too that it's really just kind of a blur. So you can't really technically really focus on a point and see the dimple hitting the ball when you hit it. Things are just moving too fast when that's happening. So I'm really just kind of looking in that general area. If you look at their Anachosaurus dam, David Duvall, there is video where they're actually at impact. They're like this. They're looking, 8 feet in front of, or at least it kind of looks, maybe their eyes are down here and their head's turned like that, but they're looking way out in front. Dustin Johnson on his wedge shots, he kind of does that. He kind of swings through and he's kind of already looking up ahead. Obviously, he's a pretty dang good wedge player. So there's no proven, physically proven kind of thing out there. It's really just a personal preference. So Rob T says, working on the move, hitting some nice drives, but occasionally hitting pulled pop-ups, especially later in the round. I'm guessing I'm reverting to over-the-top move, trying to narrow down swing thoughts to 1 or 2 that will help guard against the pop-up result. Yeah, so if you're swinging, if you're hitting a pull, what's happening when you hit a pull is that you're coming over the top and then the face is in line with that. So basically, you're swinging, if you're right-handed, you're swinging toward first base, if you're imagining a baseball field in front of you, and the face is also in that direction. That's basically what's happening. If you are, that can also cause the pop-up, by the way. So a pop-up is typically caused, not always, but typically caused when the club is bottoming out at the ball. So this ball is elevated, it's on a tee. You're coming in and the club bottoms, it's working down, 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 down. It bottoms out where the ball is, which is going to make you hit under it, and then it starts to work up after that. Ideally, with the driver, what we want to do is we want this club to work down, 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 and then we want it to work a little bit up into the ball. So that way, it gives you a higher launch and lower spin. Well, in order to make that happen, you have to swing, you have to shallow out the club and swing from the inside. It'd be very difficult. You can swing over the top and have the low, and you can move around the ball position and be crazy with it. But generally, if you swing over the top, that can cause that pop-up. If you swing more from the inside, that's going to get this club grounding out more before the ball. The way you can think about that is if you imagine if I swung 45 degrees if I swung toward first base, right, where's my club going to bottom out? It's going to be back here, right, more in front of my trail foot. So that's what's happening in the swing. You want to get that path working out to the right by shallowing out the club. So that's basically what later in the round, you're probably just getting, maybe you've hit some drives that were good early in the round, really thinking about and emphasizing the move, and maybe you got comfortable and didn't really keep emphasizing it. That's a normal thing. And maybe that you're getting tired, and when you're getting tired and fatigued, you're kind of reverting back to the old motions. So when that happens, I would just really be cognizant of it and really exaggerate the shallowing a lot more, getting that ball, trying to feel like that ball is starting to the right, almost feeling like you're hitting a block, right? You're shallowing it so much that the ball is going to be a block out to the right. That's what I'd recommend doing. Rob T goes on to say, P.S. when practicing the move, do you recommend trying to merge the components versus trying to think about 3 or 4 things? Do you recommend trying to merge the components versus trying to think about 3 or 4 things? Not sure what you mean. Trying to merge the components of what? I mean, the move is really, it's just wrist angles. It's one thing. It's one move that you can break down into multiple components, right? So if that's what you're asking. So the move is literally that. Way up to the top, that's the move, right? That right there, that's one move, right? But you can break it down into multiple components. You can break it down into, okay, it's lead arm, internal rotation with the shoulder. It's inward rotation with the wrist. It's bowing the lead wrist. It's external rotation of my arm and my shoulder. It's supination, outward rotation of my trail arm, and then it's extension of my wrist. I can break it down and to make it really, really complicated and try to think about all million things at one time. But in reality, it's just all those things put together, right? It's just rotating, it's turning the doorknob to the right and bowing the wrist. That's all I would really think about. It's just this. And if you get to where you're doing the tennis racket drill and you understand that it's really just one motion, that's what you're trying to do, then it becomes a lot easier. And that tennis racket drill helps you to do that. So the motion, if you're not familiar with what the tennis racket drill is, it's from the move course. But what we're trying to do with the tennis racket drill is we're trying to get the strings to be pointing out away from you and to be able to get the strings kind of more like this, right? So instead of having the strings like this and then pointing away from you, you want it like this and pointing away from you. That's what the move is. So what most people are doing is they're getting the strings kind of straight up and down, and then they're actually kind of turning the strings toward them, right? So that's from cupping the wrist. So that's coming down. That'd be kind of like a slice motion, right? What we need to do is we need the strings to be more flatter and then pointing away from you, right? And that's what the move is. So it's just one move. I would try to simplify it to thinking about it as one thing, even though it's got many components to it. Try to make that into one thing, and you'll probably be more successful if you do that. So Ronnie A says, watch your video on shaft lean. Also watch Clay showing straight line release. Seemed like you were holding shaft lean and not releasing. Can you please explain what I missed? Yeah, so exactly. So any drill is going to be an exaggeration of what you're trying to do, right? So any good drill anyway. So if you're trying to, if you're someone who's coming into contact and you're throwing the arms in front and you're flipping the wrists in front, right? And you're not getting any body rotation, then you need to exaggerate the opposite. You need to get a lot more body rotation and chest rotation. So a good drill for that would be to basically feel like, improving your golf swing does not have to be that complicated. It's literally as simple as exaggerating the opposite of what the issue is, right? So if you're hitting a slice, learn to hit a hook, right? That's the exact opposite. You don't really want to hit a hook. You don't want to create a new problem. But the reality is that if you try to hit a hook, you're probably just going to hit it straight, right? Or you're going to hit it less of a slice. And what you want to do is get to where you can actually hit a hook. And then at that point, you ease off of it. So when you're working on the release of the club, the best and fastest way to work on it, in my opinion, and what I found success with students, is to basically feel like you don't release the club at all. You hold on to the leg. Now, realistically, technically, do we want to do that in the golf swing? No, you wouldn't really want to do that. But you feeling like you're doing that would more than likely get you to where you're releasing the club closer to where you want to be. And you want to think about it this way. If you actually get to where you're really holding off the release and you're not letting that club release and you're using all your body rotation and you're losing a lot of speed because of that, Well, then you can start adding the arms and the wrists back in there. So any good drill is going to be an exaggeration of what you're trying to do, right? The drill that he's talking about, or at least I assume, is going to be more like this. You're holding off the release. So you're creating this lag, and then you're coming in and you're holding off that release. You're not releasing the club. You wouldn't technically want to do that in the golf swing, but I'm telling you, you do this drill and you're going to look at it on video, it's going to feel like you're doing this, but the reality is it'll probably look like that, where you're actually releasing the club more out front. And you need to keep feeling like that until you actually start to hold off, start to literally hold off the release. So we do want to release the club. That's exactly what we want to do, but it's a drill that's an exaggeration. Just like if you're fixing your slice or whatever it might be. I talked about earlier, someone was talking about early extension, right? Well, they're probably extending right away to start the downswing. So what would be the fix for that? Feel like you're not extending at all. Feel like you never lose the angle at all. You keep that angle all the way through. It's not complicated. You know what you have to do. It's just a matter of doing it, right? So I wouldn't try to complicate things with silly drills that don't work and things like that. You know, you want to be to get the best results. All the best drills, in my opinion, and drills that I've seen that work the best and get the fastest results are ones where you literally exaggerate doing the wrong thing to get, which is the opposite of the wrong thing that you're doing, right? So if you're slicing, you exaggerate, you try to get that ball to snap hook as much as you possibly can. And then if you actually start getting the ball to snap hook a lot, then you just ease off of it. That's the fastest way to do it. It's going to take forever to get rid of your slice if you just try to slice a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. You try to get the face square and the club right on plane. It's not different enough from what you're already doing. You're already, if that worked, then you would already be hitting it straight. If that worked, then because you're trying to hit the ball straight, but you're hitting a big slice, right? So you have to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. So hopefully that makes sense. I actually just had a student email me, and I had him doing that drill, and he said he kind of dismissed it at first because it was like I was telling him to hold off the release, and that's exactly what it's doing. You do want, if you're releasing your lag too early, then you need to feel like you're never releasing it. It never really releases, and then if you actually never release it, then you can ease off of it. All right, so David K says, my putting stroke is feeling very unstable, and I think it is starting with my grip. I'm using a reverse overlap. Never really liked any of the other styles, and can feel shaky from drawback to putting through. Can you help me find a stable grip and stable smooth stroke so I can miss with confidence, at least on the line with the pace I intend? Yeah, so the putting grip is really something. It's really a personal preference for the most part. So you mentioned in the beginning there that you're using a reverse overlap, right? So I assume that means you're doing this reverse overlap. So you have your hand overlapping here, and left hand low, reverse overlap. That's what it sounds like. That's what you're doing, right? So, that's what feels the best for you, but that may not be getting you the best results. So I would just play around with a bunch of different grips. The main thing with the putting grip is you just want to make sure that it's it's more in your hand. And the reason for that is to get it more lined up. So that would be one thing I'd be looking at, is to make sure that the putter shaft is lined up with your arms. Because if you have it like this, then it's going to be unstable, right? If you have it like this, it's going to be unstable. So you want to have it lined up with your forearm. So you can have some bend in your forearms here. Let me actually grab a putter. All right, but you want it to be lined up with your forearms there. And in order to get it lined up with your forearms, you have to be getting it kind of going down the lifeline of your hand there. So if you kind of squeeze your hands together, you can see how there's a lifeline forming here with your thumb pad. You want that putter to be going right through that. So whether you use a reverse overlap, right, or a traditional kind of putting grip, which is what I use, or you use like a claw type or a pencil grip, or you use, I think I saw kind of Tony Finau kind of using this kind of putting grip, right? Whatever you use, you want to have it going down the forearm. That's going to stabilize it. So I would really need to see what's going on, but I would just play around with a bunch of different grips to find where it's really personal preference. That's why you look on tour and you see so many different putting grips. It's not even funny. You have to find what works best for you. So I wish I could tell you, oh, well, this grip's going to be the perfect one for you. I don't really know because it's really personal preference. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I know exactly what grip you need to stabilize things. The one thing I can tell you as far as stabilizing the grip is to make sure, or to stabilizing the putter, is to make sure that it's down your forearms there. So if you're looking at it on video, if you drew a straight line, from the shaft all the way, you should be able to draw all the way up through the middle of your elbow there. It should be a pretty much straight line. If you have it like this, then that could be the reason that you're seeing, some instability there, because the thing's not lined up. It's going to want to move off of there if you do that. So you want to get it more in line with that. As far as getting a smooth stroke, what I recommend doing is getting something. Actually, I like this. I don't have any affiliation with this, but I actually just got this a little bit ago. So this is it's called Back to Basics, and it's basically a putting mirror that's got if you look here, it's kind of got it shows kind of the putting arc. So it's got a slight arc on it. So what you can do is you can set up to it, and it's got the face, but the face will be all the way back and through. So you should be bringing the club a little bit to the inside, right? Inside to inside as you're coming through. So what you can do is you can set up with this, and you can actually put in these holes in here, you can actually put T's in there as well. You can put T's in there all the way along the way. So that way, if you get outside the T's, you'll hit it, right? And it's giving you feedback. I do, this is the putting rail. This is also useful, right? This putting rail, which can also be useful in grooving the stroke. And it allows you to bring the putter inside as well, even though it's just a lot of people say that this makes you go straight back and straight through, but it actually doesn't, because now if you kept your putter on the ground, it would be straight back and straight through. But because your putter elevates off of the ground, it actually moves to the inside a little bit, right? So you can kind of put it on here and kind of get a feel for how the stroke would be, right? And then you can move the putter off of it and then just stay, move it like a 1/4 inch off of it, and then stay a 1/4 inch off of it, putting back and through. And that can kind of help you to groove the stroke. But the grip, again, personal preference, and then get it lined up with the arms to stabilize it without really seeing or knowing what's going on. It'd be really difficult for me to be able to help you otherwise. I wish I could just tell you the one grip that's going to stabilize everything for you, but it just doesn't exist. Everyone's going to be a little bit different there. But if you search on online, that Back to Basics thing, I kind of like that. I saw Cameron Smith using it, so I ordered one myself, and I like it. I've been practicing with it a little bit. I like that it kind of shows you the stroke. I like that it's a big enough mirror to show you where your eyes are over the ball. Also tells you kind of where your shoulders are, to make sure you're not open or closed with the shoulders. I have a tendency to want to open up my shoulders a little bit, and I end up pulling putts a little bit. But beyond that, I would recommend working through the drills in the Toss We Golf putting system as well. To get to that, click the instruction tab, click the house icon, then that'll take you to the homepage. Go down the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses there. So Ed D says, hi Q, 2 issues I see on video. 1, I'm moving my head off of the ball in the backswing, probably 6 inches by the top, and my head turns so I can only see the left side of my head. So let's talk about that a little bit. So that's either because you're swaying your hips, right? So you're doing this number, swaying the hips, or you're getting too much forward bend, right? So you're not extending when you go up to the top of the swing. So to stay to keep a nice steady head and to keep a good spine angle, you're actually going to be turning, tilting, and extending. So when I say turning, I'm talking about your hips are turning and your shoulders are turning. So if I just stood here like this, and that would be the golf swing, right? So that's the top of the swing. So I've turned my hips and I've turned my shoulders, right? The other thing that we're doing is we're extending, because at address, we're in some forward bend. And if I just turned and I didn't extend, I would look like this, right? And that might be what you're doing. You may be not extending enough, right? So you need to, there's going to be a small amount of extension. And when I say extension, I'm talking about, we talked a little bit earlier about this, but the angle between your lower body and your upper body, if I'm making that angle bigger, that's extension, right? So at address, I've got an angle here. And then when I go up to the top, I'm doing this a little bit, right? So here's my address position, and then here's the top of the swing, right? So if I turn and then I extend, I basically look like this, right? So I'm not staying in that forward bend. I'm extending a little bit. And then we're going to tilt. The tilt is our shoulders, right? So if you notice here, if I just turn my shoulders and get a little bit of extension, right, then that's what that looks like. I have to tilt down. So if you look here, if I just turn and I don't tilt, this is my top of my swing. I need to tilt. I need to do this as well as I'm going back in the backswing. So there's my tilt. So I'm turning, tilting, and extending in the backswing. If your head is moving way off the ball, then that means you're sliding, most likely. So I'm doing this, right? Or I'm not extending. I'm just staying in that forward tilt. So I would look on video. An easy way to see would be to draw a line on the outside of your hip here. It could be a little bit of a combination of both, by the way. But draw a line on the outside of your hip. If you're moving into that line when you're starting the backswing, you're sliding your hips away, then that's what's causing it. So something you can do, grab a chair, grab a golf bag, grab something that's got some mass to it, put it on the outside of your hips, and make swings where you're really you're concentrating on loading up into your trail side. And when I say loading up, I'm talking about shifting weight, putting pressure into your trail side, and then turning your hips away from that, right? So this to this is what you want to be doing. Now, if you see that your hip isn't moving into that line and you're just staying in forward bend, then I would almost feel like you're going up to the top like this and you're moving your head toward the target. Just like we talked about here, it's fault, feel, real, right? The fault is this. You need to feel this to get this, right? So, and if you overdo it, then ease off of it. If you're still not doing it, then exaggerate it some more, maybe go slower, so on and so forth. So that's what I'd be looking at on video. And then 2 says my shoulder turn is flat, nearly level. How can I stay more centered? What is the proper angle of shoulder on the way back? Do I need to feel like I swing shorter with my arms, my hands end up behind my head, I'm face on? Yeah, so it sounds like if you're turning the shoulders level, then that means that you're not tilting down and you're most likely in too much forward bend, right? So you need to feel like the shoulder tilts down a lot, right? And that you are almost reverse pivoting as you go up to the top. That's what I would try to feel like is going on. So I feel like your spine, like your shoulder is really, really going down and in front of your head like that. So you're doing this, it sounds like, right? So too much forward bend and level shoulders. You need to get some side bend as you're going up to the top and some back extension. So that would be like that. You need to feel that is going on. But that's what you literally want to do. What you may need to feel like your shoulders are going way down and that you're almost like you're leaning toward the target. And if you actually overdo that, then I would just ease off of it. As far as the specific angle, there's no specific angle. I wish I could tell you, yeah, you need to be at 40 degrees, but there's no specific angle. You just want to if your head is staying steady, right? If you're looking from down the line and face on and your head doesn't have excessive movement, then I would say your tilts are pretty good, right? Because in order for your head to stay fairly steady, it's okay for it to move around a little bit. You know, most tour players, their head's going to move off of the ball a little bit. It's typically going to move down a little bit as they go up to the top. But we're talking inches here. Low amount of inches. So 1, 2, 3 at most in the backswing. And then the downswing, it moves forward and down, usually some more, and then sometimes a little bit up through contact. But a little bit up and back sometimes through contact. But you know, if your head's moving 6 inches off the ball, then your shoulders are too level and you're not tilting enough and you're not extending enough. So you'll know that you're doing it enough if your head stays fairly steady. I wouldn't try to look at it at a certain angle. If you're not tilting your shoulders down by getting that side bend as you're going in the backswing, then your head's going to move off of the ball like that, right? So you'll know, but there's no specific angle because different clubs are going to have different angles, right? So my wedge is going to have a different shoulder plane than my driver because I'm going to be, the driver's longer. I'm going to have a club that's different. Somebody that's 5'8" is going to look different than somebody who's 6'4" and 5'10". You know, the shoulder planes are going to be different. So body geometry, right? Someone who has longer legs and shorter torso and a longer torso and short legs is going to have different shoulder angles than the other side. So there's no specific angles there. It's just about keeping. If you have that steady head, then you know you're doing good. So you need more extension and you need more side bend going up to the top. Hunter M says, if you lift the lead heel in the backswing, could you explain at what point in the downswing you should replant the heel? Right at the start of the downswing. You want to be, as soon you get here, and then at the start of the downswing, you want to replant that thing right in the start of the downswing. Bill M says, I'm confused about 2 topics related to squaring the club face. Section 2.3 of the straight line release talks about an automatic release, whereas the move section has deliberate rotation of the club face. What should I do? Really, you're going to be doing both. It's not like in the move, like you square the face and then it doesn't do anything the rest of the way, right? It's still going to rotate as you're coming through contact. If you look at tour players, the club face is not like that the whole way. It's more like that, even though they're doing the move, and then it kind of rotates a little bit more as they're coming into contact. So you're really doing both is really what's going on there. So let's talk about what changes the face angle. So what changes the face angle, number one, is the release of the club. So if you release the club, and I'm just talking about in the sense of releasing it early and not how the club face is rolling through. I'm talking in the sense of in relationship to your arm. So where it passes the hands, that's the release, right? So club not released, not released, not released, not released. There it's released. This is after the release, after the release. So if you're thinking about where this club is coming in and splitting my forearms, that's the release point of the club. So if you release the club later, right? Let's say you release it out here and you have shaft lean, that's going to open the face. So you have to do other things to close the face. If you release the club early, right, that's going to close the face, right? So if you imagine this, if I have my angle finder on here, and if you're looking from this way, and I have the shaft straight up and down, and I just push this handle forward, that opens the face. If I have it straight up and down and I push the handle back, that closes the face. So the release of the club can change the face angle. The other thing that changes the face angle is forearm rotation, right? So forearm rotation plus arm rotation in general. So this, if I go like this, that's going to twist the shaft, right? So that's arm rotation. The other thing is flexion extension of the wrist. So if I just have the club like this and I do that with my wrist, that opens and closes the face, right? And then the last piece is the handle. So if I have the handle high, that's going to open the face. If I have the handle low, it's going to close the face. If I have it flush, it's going to be square, right? So if you're an early releaser of the club, right, then you're basically closing the face. So if you look here, I have to really, and usually if you're in early release of the club, you're really rolling your arms over as well. But if you look, my wrist angles, my lead wrist is going to be cupped and my trail wrist is going to be flat. That opens the face. So if I flip and then I have those wrist angles, that's going to give me a square club face, right? But if I keep these same wrist angles and then I have a later release and I get a lot of shaft lean, my face is wide open. So I have to change my wrist angles, right? I'm going to have less roll. I'm going to have more wrist angle as you're coming in. Now, generally, ideally, you would have, you know, a little bit more of a square face through contact. This is debatable. So there's something that's called rate of closure. So rate of closure is what they're talking about, is how fast, basically, what's the rate of this club face and how it's rotating through impact, right? So that would be a slow rate of closure and that'd be a fast rate of closure, right? So theoretically, you would think, okay, a slower rate of closure, you would be more consistent because, you know, the face is going from open to close less fast and there would be less timing to get it right there. Theoretically, I would agree with that, but there are players that they've measured this on that have a fast rate of closure and are amazing golfers, right? So I don't necessarily think that everyone needs to have a slow rate of closure, because I think you basically need to do what's more automatic to you, right? What's more natural to you. And if that works well, then do that. But if you're going from open to close very quickly and you have no control of the club face, then you may want to consider trying to square the face earlier and having a little less rate of closure. So yeah, there's no necessarily right or wrong. If you look at Phil Mickelson, right, probably a higher. I don't know if it's been measured, but just looking at his swing, you know, he comes through, that trail hand gets on top, you know, very quickly. That face is going from open to close very, very quickly. I mean, guy's one of the best golfers of all time, right? So like I said, it's debatable. But you have to look at if doing the straight line release gets you to square up the face and having a little bit more of a rolled release is better for you, then do that. But if you have trouble controlling the face, and you may want to consider working on the move more, getting it square a little bit earlier, not having as much roll through contact, and that may help you keep the face square a little bit longer. But again, it may not be a natural thing. That's kind of what it comes down to. The rate of closure argument is that a rolled release is typically a little bit more of a natural kind of feeling, which if you do something naturally, it's a lot easier to control. Whereas if you're squaring this up, you may have to have the feeling that you're really holding off the club from rolling over through contact, which can be difficult to control, right? And then it's a kind of an unnatural feeling. It may be difficult to control, and in that sense, you may not be controlling the club face that well. So there's an argument on both sides. You have to find what works best for you. So Ron says, regarding the force pertaining to pinning the upper arms to the chest, do I really need to exert some force to issue the arms stay intact with the chest? Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's not going to happen. I don't know how it would happen if you didn't use forces. You're going to be going up to the top, and then you should be basically turning your chest into your arms here as you're coming down. And if you keep the chest rotating, then you'll be able to keep the arms against the chest. So there's a force being applied, right, from the rotation of your chest to keep the arms pinned to the chest. But if you stop that force, you stop that rotation, right? Let's say you have a force going the other way, right? You stall. Right. Well, if that happens, the arm's going to move away. That's where that chicken wing comes from. Right. So if you want to keep the arm pinned to the chest and keep the body opening up, or if you want to keep or be able to get the hands in front, typically you've got to keep rotating the chest and keep that arm pinned to the chest all the way through. But it's going to be basically the force that you want to use is the rotation of your chest. I think maybe what you're asking is, am I trying to force my, do this, force my chest onto my arm? It's not so much that. It's more that you're trying to you're trying to rotate your chest into your arm for as long as you possibly can. Not necessarily trying to keep your arm pinned to your chest. like this kind of, like you're doing what I think about it this way is you're not trying to put a force this way with your arm to keep it on there. You're trying to put a force that way with your chest to keep the arm on there. That's what you're trying to do. So Dennis E says, I'm a 71-year-old golfer. I have low back, degenerate arthritis in the L1, L5. I don't have a video creating a safe and supportive stance for someone like me. Any suggestions? Or I don't find a video creating a safe and supportive stance for someone like me. I'll be honest with you. I'm not really sure, Dennis. To be honest with you, if your back isn't good enough to take a stance, to just have a stance, then your back's probably not good enough to play golf. To be honest, if you can't just get into a normal stance, you're not going to be able to turn and rotate normally. So, that's basically what it comes down to. Your stance isn't going to be any different. If you can't take a normal stance, then you're probably going to have a hard time playing golf in general. It's probably not safe. Safe. You quoted it in there, or supportive, or supportive. I mean, you could just stand straight up like this and just kind of swing the arms. That would be about the safest thing you can do, is to not rotate at all. Just stand straight up and down and have your club kind of like this, and then just swing the arms back and through. That's probably the safest thing to do. Now, is that going to be the best thing to play the best golf? No, but if that's only what you can physically do, then that's what you can do. But that's the only thing I would say is you just need to be more upright. If you can't bend over, have any kind of forward bend because it puts pressure, you're not going to be able to rotate and stuff too. You're going to have to just have an armsy, very, very arm-driven swing. So I just basically just stand straight up for the most part. Ronnie A says, thanks, Q. Got it. Ronnie H, no problem. Robert M says, how much draw is too much where you start losing? And then cut off. How much draw is too much where you actually lose distance instead of gain? It is functional of club head speed. I would say if you're putting more than 10, 15 yards of curvature on the ball, you're going to start losing some distance, especially on a slice. Slice more so than a draw. The reason for that is when you draw the ball, and this is why I suggest that most players use a draw, because most players are really released and most players don't have a lot of speed. So most players are losing distance from having the face open and adding loft and stuff like that. So if you learn to hit a draw, you're going to be much, much better off, because when you hit a draw, it closes the club face a little bit, which helps de-loft the face a little bit and helps you hit a stronger shot. So that's what I would recommend is a draw for most people. So usually you're going to lose more distance with a fade versus a draw because of that. So I would say if you're getting more than 10 yards of fade, you're probably definitely most likely. And it really depends on how. So if you hit the ball 300 yards and you have 10 yards of fade versus someone who hits it 200 yards with 10 yards of fade, that person hitting at 200 yards is losing more distance because of that. So a lot of it depends on how much speed you have to begin with. But in general, I would say 10 to 15 yards. With a fade, you're definitely losing distance. 10, maybe 15, possibly 20 yards with a draw, you may be losing distance with a driver. Like I say, if you're doing that with an 8-iron and you're slicing it 15 yards, you're definitely losing a lot of distance. So a lot of it depends on how far you're hitting the ball. The further you're hitting the ball, the more curvature, the more amount offline you can have and not lose distance, because it's actually technically not that much more curvature, if you understand what I'm saying. So Frank M says, TSB recommends in the setup that your back, shoulders, and head are stacked up on each other, and we bend our hips, keeping everything stacked above. However, as I step into the ball, I drop my shoulders and are hunched over. What is your setup routine to keep the shoulders and head up? So the way that you want to set up, let's just kind of go over the setup, an easy way to set up, assuming you're not physically incapable of setting up this way. But basically, an easy way to do it is to basically stand straight up. So get into the width of your stance. So as far as stance width is concerned, and these are just generalities. It doesn't mean that you can't be more successful with a narrower stance or a wider stance. But let's say I'm just hitting a normal iron. I would say that the outside of my shoulders would go straight down through my ankles. So that would be pretty normal stance width, right? So now I'm just going to stand straight up from there, and I'm going to take this club and I'm going to put it on my belt buckle and on my shirt buttons. So it's basically going right through my spine. And then from there, I'm going to get a little, let me turn this way. I'm going to get a little bit of flex in my knees, and I'm going to get my knees basically right over the balls of my feet. So right there. So I don't want to go too much, right? Because then that's going to get me like this, and I don't want to have my backside too far over. If I'm too much like this, I'm going to tend to stand up in the backswing. It doesn't mean that you can't set up that way. If we look at Keegan Bradley, he sets up basically like this, and it's very successful. So it's not, again, these are generalities. I wouldn't take this as gospel. These are just where I would start out at, and if it doesn't work for you, then I would tinker it. But these are kind of general where you're going to see kind of the average, basically better players, right? So over the balls of the feet. And then what you're going to do is, let's actually start over, because I don't want to do this part until we get into the actual posture that we want to be in. So again, width, get a little bit of flex in the legs, and then let your arms basically hang straight down, just hanging straight down. And I want you to push your hips back and your chest forward until, keeping that flex in the legs, until basically your arms are roughly about 4 or 5 inches in front of your legs, right? And then from there, that's where you grip the club. Now, as far as the tilt is concerned, once you get in that position, you can take the club and put it on your belt buckle, on your shirt buttons, and then tilt until your club hits the inside of your leg. Right, so if here I'm straight up and down here, so I'm straight up and down. Now I'm going to tilt until that hits the inside of my leg, and there I go. I'm in my good setup position here. So if you look at it from this way, again, I'm going to go over my knees over the balls of my feet. I'm going to push my hips back and my chest forward until my arms are basically about 4 or 5 inches in front. I'm going to take the club, and I'm going to put it on my belt buckle, on my shirt buttons. I'm going to tilt, right? Staying in that posture. I'm just tilting. And now I can take the club and I grab it. There's my setup position. So they're not stacked on top of each other. Your nose is going to be a little bit behind your belt buckle, right? This is what we talk about in the stable fluid spine, getting that little bit of spine tilt at address. That's in the stable fluid spine course. We also talk more about the setup in there. To get to the stable fluid spine, click the instruction tab, then click the top speed golf system. Then click the stable fluid spine from there. All right, so Ron says, I'm also having a tough time shallowing out and bowing wrist. I find that the right arm tuck helps, e.g. thinking about one thing helps. Is there any other drill or hint to help in shallowing and bowing the drill? So I'd be working through all of the drills in the move course. That's going to be all about getting that club to shallow out. We also have tons and tons of videos in the vault. So we actually, if you want to find more drills, the search function on the website would be very useful. So if you go in the upper right-hand corner of the website and search shallow, then you'll find lots and lots of videos on shallowing out the club. We're shallowing. You'll find tons of videos there. So that's in the upper right-hand corner of the website. There's a little search box there if you're looking for more drills outside of the move. And then if you're on a mobile device, you can still find that search function. Just click the icon in the upper right-hand corner. That will expand a menu. Scroll down through that menu all the way to the bottom. You'll find the search box there, and you can search there as well. So Pat M says, hi, Q. I'm always topping the golf ball. So topping the golf ball is going to be from either hanging back too much and the club is bottoming out and then working up into the ball, right? So I might be hanging back and then my club's bottoming out right here and then works up into the ball and then I top it. Or it could be the opposite of that, where I'm getting too far forward, right? I might be coming over the top and I'm coming in and I'm topping the ball by kind of going like that. Or it could be that the club's bottoming out where the ball is, but I'm kind of standing up or getting the club too high as I'm coming in instead of kind of hitting down and through the ball. So if you want some drills to help with that, I'd recommend we actually have a course that is specifically for this. It's called the Stop Chunking and Topping course, and it gets you to where we're staying behind the ball as we get to the top. Then we're moving our body forward in the correct way. We're getting that ground contact to happen in the right spot. So to get to that, click the house icon. That will take you to the home page. And if you scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses there. Select the Stop Chunking and Topping course. Work through those drills and get rid of those tops. So Saki says, please, can you help me with tips on how to get rid of the cupped lead wrist? Doesn't matter what I do. I just can't seem to get to the top of my backswing without a cupped wrist. So one thing I would consider is if you have a really strong grip, meaning your thumb's more on the side of the grip instead of the top, right? You can get away with having a little bit of a cupped wrist at the top. So if I had a flat wrist and a very strong grip, that club face would be in a very, very strong position. It might be in too strong of a position. So keep that in mind. If you have a really strong grip, thumbs more on the side, more on the side. If you imagine, the top of the grip is 12 o'clock, the side of the grip is 3 o'clock. If your thumb's on 3 o'clock, right, and you have a cupped wrist, that club face is actually going to be in a good position. But let's say you have a weak grip and you have a cupped wrist. Well, that club face is very, very open. You see, and then that can lead to issues like slicing and coming down steep and things like that. So if that is the case with anything you're changing to do, you're trying to do, and I get this all the time. People tell me I tried everything. Well, have you tried going really slow, and have you tried pausing at the top with the wrist? So it doesn't always work out to where you can say, okay, well, I know I need to keep my wrist flat, and I'm just going to try to do it. It almost never works because speed takes away feel. You have a program, your body is programmed right now to have that wrist cupped at the top. So you have to reprogram yourself to do that. You have to retrain yourself to do that. And the way that you do that is by going slow and pausing. So that's what I would do is I would go really, really slow up to the top and I would pause, have that flat wrist, and then I would come down really, really slow. And then I would start working toward taking out the pause and still going slow, making sure I'm keeping that wrist flat. Then I would try to go faster and faster. And when it breaks down, I'm going to do more slow reps so I can get more comfortable with it and then try to go a little bit faster again. If it breaks down again, then I'm going to. So that's really the process that you want to go through. What it sounds like to me is you're just trying to keep the wrist flat. You're taking full speed, full length swings, and you're seeing on video that even though you're trying to keep it flat, it's not. It's almost always going to happen. So you have to break it down, go slow. One thing you can do is you can take, I don't have a glove handy. I thought I did. But if you take a glove, right, put your glove on and then put a T on your glove, then that will give you some feedback. Because if you bend your wrist and you have that T on the Velcro of the glove there, the T will poke you. So you'll kind of feel that. You can take a fork and kind of do that. The fork will kind of poke you if you do that as well. So that'd be another thing. There's training aids out there that you can put them on your wrist, and you'll hear like a clicking sound if you break your wrist. So there are feedback mechanisms out there, but you honestly don't need those. It's nice to have that feedback. You don't have to buy one of those, or I guess you probably have a glove and some T's that would be very easy to do. But a training aid can definitely help, but it's not gonna do it. It doesn't. If you put a training aid on, it doesn't mean that you can go fast and it's going to happen. You still have to break it down, go slow, pause, go as slow as you have to go. Do it without a golf ball. Because the reality is if you can't do it slow, then you can't do it fast. If you can't do it in a pausing swing, then you can't do it in a fluid swing. If you can't do it in a half swing, then you can't do it in a full swing. And if you can't do it without the ball, then you can't do it with the ball, right? So you need to regress it to where you can do it and then build up from there. All right, last question here from Frank M. says, follow up on the setup. what is your routine to address the ball before the swing? So basically, what I would do is I'll first I'll come up and I'll see what the lie is like, so I can get an idea of what kind of swing I can make. Actually, the first thing I'll probably do is get the yardage, see the yardage, get the yardage and what I have to and so that way I can get an idea of what club I'm going to hit, and then I'm going to look at my lie and assess the lie and see, okay, well, what kind of shot can I hit out of this lie? Can I hit a normal shot? Do I have to alter myself to get? So if it's in the middle of fairway, I don't have to make any alterations. I have clean access to the ball. But if it's buried in the rough or something like that, I might need to take extra club, put the ball further back in my stance, hit more down on the ball, that sort of thing. But if it's in the fairway, there's basically not much of a limit to the kind of shots I can hit. I can hit a fade, I can hit a draw, I can hit low, I can hit high, I can hit all kinds of different shots. But if it's certain lies are going to take away shots that you can hit. If the ball is below your feet, you're not going to be able to really draw it. You're going to basically be planning to fade it a little bit, right? If the ball is way above your feet, it's going to be difficult to fade. So just go with the slope. Try to let the ball draw, right? So those are considerations. So I'm getting the yardage. I'm looking at the lie. I'm figuring out what kind of shot I can hit from that lie. Once I do that, I'm going to basically find my start line, right? So the start line isn't necessarily going to be the target. So if I'm imagining this shot in my mind, let's say I'm going to be hitting like a 5-yard draw, right? So my start line is going to be 5 yards right of the target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get behind the ball. I'm going to imagine this ball flight, right? And I may pick an intermediate target in front of my ball, because it's hard to kind of line up your body to a target that's so far away. So what I like to do is pick an intermediate target in front of my ball, like a foot or two in front of my ball, and then I can come in and I can see, okay, well, there's a leaf that's 2 feet in front of my ball. That's right on line with where I want to start this ball. So that's where I'm going to come in, and I'm going to align my body with that. And then again, I'm going to look up. I'm going to see the ball flight. Right? I'm going to be kind of keeping my feet loose, doing my waggles and everything. And then I'm going to look down at the ball. I'm going to pull the trigger. That's basically my trigger, is looking back down at the ball, putting the club on the ground, and starting the swing. That's my trigger. Some people, will have a forward press. Some people might kick their leg in. Some people, there's all kinds of things you can do. But me, it's basically I'm waggling, I'm keeping my feet loose, and then I'm looking down at the ball, I'm putting the club on the ground, and that's my trigger. That's when I go. I don't think about much beyond that. A lot of times if you sit there and you think over the ball too long, that can kind of get you freezing up. So find yourself a trigger to use to kind of get your swing started, and always use that to get the swing going. So thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. There's no office hours on Friday. I'm off that day, and all the other instructors are busy doing their thing. So unfortunately, we don't have anybody to cover it for Friday. So no office hours Friday, and obviously Monday as well. No office hours for the holiday. We'll be back here Tuesday after tomorrow. We'll be back here Tuesday of next week. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all next time.